Hi everyone, welcome to RPC Standards Call number 2. We have a brief agenda today. There is 4 bullet points listed on the tracking issue for the agenda. Here, I will post it in the Zoom as a reminder to anybody. And then either we wrap early or we can open the floor for questions, comments, and concerns. So first off, I found a good example of some of the things that we've talked about in the past, which is asserting on raw error messages. We spent a little bit of time talking about error handling and how it should be done, how it should be considered in the testing, et cetera, et cetera. If you look at the first bullet point in the agenda, you'll see an example where this is running against Besu. Where we failed a RPC compatibility test here for a couple of reasons, but one of them is it does assert on a Go specific, specifically a guest specific error message. So that's cool. That's exactly what we were looking for. We were trying to find those types of things in order to filter them out of the Hive tests and then figure out, how they got in there in the first place. My guess is that they got in there because we're using Geth as the test filler. And so, I don't really have any problem with that. I think that makes a ton of sense because Geth is the reference implementation, but we may need to filter those out or ignore the message as part of the test that we're creating. Any thoughts or considerations on that? Has anybody seen this in other places? Is this a first time thing to people? Is this a surprise? Do we suspect that there's not much of this going on, or maybe a ton of it? Okay.
Sorry, this is my first time joining or looking at any of this, so I have no context. But
Uh, no problem. Welcome.
thanks.
If you have any context that we can help you establish, just let us know.
Cool. Essentially, just here to listen, right? We heard these
Sure.
calls were starting, wanted to hop in, see what's going on, see if there's anywhere we can participate or help. But otherwise, yeah, just here to listen for now.
Yeah, no problem. What team are you with?
We're with Snake Charmers.
Okay. I
Yeah,
am
I
not.
think the three of us are we're on the EF Python team. So we
Oh,
maintain Web3 Pi mostly. And we had a chat with both Felix and Marius that said the RPC spec needed some more hands on deck. So
oh, fantastic.
yeah, so I'm Carrie, and then Paul and Felipe are both on my team too.
Rad.
So
Oh,
yeah,
that's very exciting. Thank you. Thank you.
yeah,
Send in the cavalry. This is great.
yeah, yeah. So as far as the error messaging goes, I think I think that's probably the biggest place that we see discrepancies between clients. Um, but yeah, it'd be good to standardize on that.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, great. How does that, maybe let's talk a little bit about meta stuff here, right? So I think this is one of the things that we keep circling around and we haven't really gotten any traction on. Is like, what's the process here? Like we found a thing that's broken in the spec, right?
mhm.
Do we just aggressively start updating it? Do we start building schemas or stronger type checking or like what's the plan here when we find these little things that definitely need to change, and the problem is that they're undefined, and so everybody can say, well, I'm right, you're not right, et cetera, et cetera. Like what does your team want to see as far as a process, I guess is my question.
um, I don't. I'll speak for myself. I don't know that I have much of a preference for process. It would be nice if there was like some document somewhere. And I know there was either an EAP or an ERC that had all this stuff at one point, but it's my sense, I haven't looked at it lately, but it's my sense that it's not very well maintained. And so I think like, I don't know about the process exactly, but just like having a place to point to say, this is the standard that, you know, whoever cares agrees upon type of thing. So
Okay.
yeah, I don't know, maybe that's just pull requests in GitHub, but how have you been doing it in the past?
That's
Because I
the
don't
problem.
think these are new calls, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of what we're trying to build. You mentioned that you thought that there was an EAP or an ERC or something in the past
Uh-huh.
that kind of covered this.
Yeah.
Is that maybe we dust that off and sharpen that a little bit?
Yeah, maybe that's the best place to start for now. Who all is involved in this process usually?
Um,
You?
yeah, I mean, I'm consistently here. Felix cares about it and has been here consistently
Okay.
as well. He is otherwise obligated today, and then otherwise it's intermittent participation. I
Okay.
one of the audiences that I would really like to get here is RPC providers. So your Alchemies, your Impuras, your people
Yeah.
like that.
Hmm.
And they all have an incentive to run multiple clients, which we love and we want to encourage. And then they have to build these weird load balancers in front of all of them to kind of normalize requests and responses and handle their routing.
Yeah.
So we could really simplify their lives quite a bit by better standardizing on these things and then expanding the coverage of what is standardized right
Yeah. Yeah.
now.
Definitely.
And then I think that like we all learned a ton from the engine API and going through that process. And I think we want that level of specification quality across the board.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Who maintains like the engine API spec? Like, are there specs for that?
That's kind of weird is like that's kind of the consensus layer has been driving that.
Uh-huh.
But it's the execution layer that needs to implement it and has to deal with it. So it's actually outside of the EAP process.
Okay.
There are often new EAPs for new features that are introduced that touch on the engine API and add
Hmm.
it, but the engine API itself is really just an execution spec. Yeah. All right, cool. So maybe we can find that EIPs and ERCs that you're thinking of and post them async in the RPC channel to start as kind of a route
Yeah.
for folks to reason about and work on.
Yeah, that sounds good. Is it the in the research and development
Yes, is the
Discord?
research.
Yeah.
Yes, research R&D Discord. There is a JSON RPC API channel.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'll do that.
Awesome. Let's see. One of the other things that we noticed is APIs kind of sometimes represent things as hex when they could be decimal. And developers find this very irritating. So anything that is like an integer value, when we represent it as hex is another step and a source of friction for developers that are trying to debug things and do analysis where they kind of have to keep a calculator open and be converting things back and forth between hex and decimals. So I could have swore there was a PR either into the spec or somewhere else that was proposing everything that's not data is an integer, a decimal integer, usually wrapped in a string because those decimal integers can be huge. And then the only place that the RPCs would use hex is for raw data. So binary data, usually RLP. I could have swore that Light Client had a PR or an issue that had been opened somewhere addressing this. And last week I was looking for it and could not find it. So I have a to-do item to follow up with him to see if I just hallucinated that. Maybe I'm talking to the wrong person, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but I think that would be a cool thing for us to add to the RPC specs. And yeah, so like for instance, base tier right now kind of does both. Yeah, it'll accept input and it'll try to be smart about it and figure out whether or not it's decimal or hex based on a leading 0x to the string. We could simplify things a little bit by getting rid of that. And yeah, yeah, it's just kind of an improvement to the spec that we found. That kind of is very broad and goes across the entire thing. Pause for a moment there. Okay. One of the other things that we noticed, this is item 3 on the agenda, is dealing with kind of aged out fields. So for instance, total terminal difficulty. We don't, or total difficulty rather. We don't really need that anymore, right? Because we're not doing proof of work. It has been removed from the execution APIs, but that's kind of a weird one, right? Like if I'm requesting a block that's pre-merge, shouldn't it still have the total difficulty field on it? And so this is maybe an opportunity for API versioning, or I generally would like to avoid API versioning whenever possible. You know, this could be a case where you just make a field optional and it stops being returned later on. But it is a kind of an undefined point that's a little bit weird. So I don't know, do folks have any preferences on these types of situations?
I don't know that I have a huge preference. I also don't love the idea of API versioning. But I think making it optional makes sense. And maybe if it's only, if it's only a pre-merge block, it like automatically gets returned. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
possible in the client, but
it
that
seems
seems like
like
it makes sense.
yeah, it seems like JSON should be fairly accommodating of that, right?
Yeah,
The clients that parse it should be able to handle that. So
yeah.
that might be a thing that we suggest. I don't know of any other examples that kind of spring to mind. Um, maybe pre-brand DAO. Um,
Yeah.
some other merge specific things. Could be the requests that we're adding in Pectra. Might be another thing that is just not present in earlier blocks, but optional in later blocks. So maybe the action item here is, a paragraph in whatever our document that we put together is on optionality and, when it's allowed, when it's not allowed, how it's represented, and how clients should deal with it. Cool. And let's see, the last one is a link to a PR. Execution APIs pull request 600. This has been out for a bit. Yeah, this has been out since October. And I guess what I am asking for is, I'm not sure if I'm asking for anything. Why don't we just socialize this, maybe a little bit harder to get folks to approve it. Maybe that's all that needs to be done here. So this is specifically addressing improving error handling for the call methods. And I believe the thinking here was talking about a vertical slice through the API, where we use this as an example for improving our error handling and error reporting. So I suppose what would be fun would be for anybody in this working group to kind of weigh in on that PR and imagine this approach being applied more broadly and deciding whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. And if you like it, then I guess we just weigh in on this, approve it, and adopt it. The PR itself does list 3 different issues at the top that all kind of, they're all symptoms of this problem.
Yeah, it'd be good to get this standardized. I can take a look at that today.
Awesome. Well, that's all I have on the agenda. We're only 20 minutes in, so do y'all have anything else you want to talk about?
Not for my end. Yeah, thanks for having us. We'll plan to join more frequently from here on out and see where we can lend a hand.
You're very welcome. It's awesome to have more support here. I'm just kind of like, I'm an amateur cat wrangler. I'm trying to do what Pooja does in her sleep. And this is an area that I think a lot of people are really interested in and just does not get much attention. And it's, you know, it's kind of old. It's a little long in the tooth. The RPC methods have been around forever. And everybody kind of looks at the way that the engine API works and wishes that they had it elsewhere. So I think this is doable. I think we definitely have engagement from client teams when we need to make changes or update things. Everybody that I've talked to has been super into it, but they're also kind of like, you know, they got other stuff to do, and the work that eventually gets done is probably pretty trivial for them to do. They kind of just need somebody to make the decision, spec it out, get the tests in front of them so that they can see that they work or don't work, and then they'll just grind them out. Today, that looks like the RPC compat tests in the Hive suite.
Okay.
So that's what we're imagining being the real driving mechanic for cleaning all this up.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Pooja. All right, rad. We'll close it early then. If nobody else has anything else they want to add. But a pretty productive 20 minutes now that the cavalry's here, so thank you. And yeah, most of the work will actually get done on Discord and the RPC compat channel, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool.
It's all very asynchronizable. So thanks again.
Awesome.
And,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep, you can have some time back. See you later.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.